Okay, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I literally pressed record, restart recording, and something just kind of went snap in my leg. Okay, but before seeking medical attention, we have Chris and television to accompany ourselves. As well, I can feel the life draining out of my body. So, well, that again, that's kind of that would have happened regardless. So get let's get Chris back on the box. I watch too much fucking television. This is Chris being surprisingly true and honest. Also surprisingly true and honest is the Solitude iteration of Family Guy, which surprisingly it looks pretty cool, I think. Television is a widely used telecommunication medium for transmitting and receiving moving. Let me try that again. Television is a widely used telecommunication medium for transmitting and receiving moving images. It is a staple in almost all North American homes, as well as many other homes throughout the world. It's also one of the favorite pastimes of our mutual friend. Indeed, when not socializing, recycling, playing video games, or ranting about blue arms, it's a fairly safe bet Chris is sitting down and watching television. Lots and lots of television. Chris gets most of his information concerning the outside world through the box, among other entertainment media. This leads to blatantly ripping off concepts and characters from whatever he watches. The interpretation of media. Chris is prone to interpreting various forms of media in his own strange way. During his attempt to put on his own ads on the Wikipedia, he claimed that the award-winning film Avatar was meant to promote the eradication of homosexuality. What? Rather than the tolerance of other cultures. How he contrived this idea is a complete mystery. Yeah, this goes so far beyond the idea of cultivation. I was gonna say Chris is the unfortunate mishap when it comes to things like cultivation theory, but somehow I feel like Chris was not only cultivated, he was also planted and seeded to be cut down all over again. Or, if not planted, he was probably eaten by a slug or a pigeon. Not only does homosexuality not feature in the film in any way, but the message of the film is it's wrong to exterminate anything. Absolutely, cinema, if you ask me. His fear of homosexuals destroying the future incidentally emerged from an episode of South Park called Goobacks, which was a satire of the controversy of illegal immigration. In the episode, a group of rednecks who had lost their jobs to the illegal immigrants from the future decided that the best way to get their jobs back was to destroy the future by making everyone gay so there wouldn't be anybody in the future. Chris, however, took everything at face value and interpreted the episode as a scare film on par with Red Dawn. In a similar vein, Chris is convinced that Family Guy is anti-gay Republican propaganda owing to his failure to interpret that the show is parodying Republicans, and that the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, is famously a supporter of gay rights. Interestingly, Chris does not have this same misconception when it comes to live action media for some reason. Well, it's because Chris thinks that cartoons are real and, live action media is only real when it comes to that there are real actors playing it, but nobody actually dies. He's explicitly stated that Seinfeld characters aren't real and justifies his like of the Saw series by saying that the violence is all made up. As shown above, Chris rarely understands any morale dispensed by media, generally wildly misinterpreting them and then citing them as justification for his ridiculous and bigoted behavior. For example, while attempting to justify his attempt to pretend to be Liquid Chris in an attempt to steal his girlfriend, he claimed that he was wrong but for the right reasons. This comes from another episode of South Park called Best Friends Forever, where he, after a satire of the Terry Chaveo controversy, it is stated that Cartman was right but for the wrong reasons. In context, it meant that his goal of shutting down the vegetative Kenny's life support was the right thing to do for reasons involving the fate of the universe that are too complex to explain here. But his motivation was completely off mark. He only did it because he knew that Kenny's death would cause him to inherit his PSP. Meanwhile, Stan and Kyle were wrong for the right reasons, as they wanted to keep Kenny alive in a perpetual vegetative state, even though they should just let him die. But they were doing so because they actually cared about Kenny, rather than exploiting the situation for their own benefit like Cartman was. Chris seems to have interpreted this somehow as, if you do a bunch of bad things like pretending to be someone else in order to steal their girlfriend, you are completely justified in doing so if your dishonest actions lead to a positive outcome, like proving that you are the true and honest Christian Weston Chandler and getting laid. Oh, I see. Two wrongs make a right. Is that Chris's logic? Because I can't think of anything else. Taste in TV. Chris is a fan of South Park and almost all of Seth MacFarlane's creations. Family Guy, American Dad, and The Cleveland Show. I don't know if Chris has ever watched Border Town, but who actually has watched Border Town? He bought tons of their episodes via the PlayStation Network for a sizable amount of money. Adult Swim is another big favourite of our autistic hero, and he even entered one of their contests and raged when he didn't win. He recently got into F is for Family, a Netflix original created by Bill Burr, which I've seen like maybe one episode of it, and it was alright. I'm not too sure if it was anything I would have gone out of my way to see more, but oh well. Anime is another area where Chris's choices are very transparent. Among some of his favourites over the years include Shuffle, essentially a tale of somewhat unlikable guy suddenly being accosted by several obedient and attractive females. Gunslinger Girl, essentially a slightly unnerving bit of softcore eroticism, and Excel Saga, while generally regarded favourably, is chock full of in-jokes and parody, things that Chris can't understand but is eager to copy. Certain bizarre choices do stick out, however. Monty Python's Flying Circus has been brought up and referenced several times, along with comedian Red Skelton and I Love Lucy. The former features absurdity probably piqued Chris's interests, while the final two are probably an offshoot of his decrepit parents. Chris is a fan of movie musicals, and his top three are On the Town, Singing in the Rain, and Meet Me in St. Louis. In the same conversation, he described Mary Poppins, another movie musical, as his favourite film. Chris seems to have also watched a fair bit of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon in the late 90s and early 2000s, making references to Cousins Skeeter, Ed, Edd and Eddy, and the Powerpuff Girls, among others. Surprisingly, I've never once seen Chris ever mention SpongeBob or Fairy Oddparents. No, yeah, that's seriously. I would have thought, honestly, Chris would have absolutely have loved SpongeBob. Like, well, the early seasons of it, but there you are. Or even Fairy Oddparents. Like, why did Chris never ever see those sorts of things? Oh well, maybe we might never know. Seeing his other interests, though, it is not surprising that he was watching shows designed for elementary schoolers when he was in high school and college. Chris has also shown an occasional preference for some horror movies, including the film adaptation of Silent Hill and the Saw series, which, although rarely mentioned by Chris, could be viewed as an inspiration for the events of Sonichu Issue 10, where the Asperpedia 4 were executed via elaborate death traps, well, elaborate by Chris's standards. If this picture is clear, Chris may be using Hulu or Hulu Plus lately to watch all the shows he can't on Netflix. Chris also uses Disney Plus. Mods Chris uploaded to Mod Nation Races indicates he's a fan of Drawn Together, for obvious reasons. He copied a scene from Beavis and Butthead in an issue of Sonichu. Also, yeah, Drawn Together, yeah, does anybody want to remember what that is? I think everybody's decided, like, they don't want to have anything to do with that. Which surprisingly also included a parody of SpongeBob SquarePants in that. But, yeah, whatever. Netflix. Chris has used Netflix to satisfy his watching needs instantaneously, enabling him to reach a near comatose state of mental saturation. Put in more practical terms, he spent more than 6 hours watching Keeping Up Appearances and South Park in a single day. Twice. In terms of averages, Chris watches roughly 3 hours of television a day, at least for the week viewed. Three hours a day? That's pretty nuts. I mean, how? How can anyone watch 3 hours of back-to-back television? That's a new one on me. The huge selection and instant watch feature, combined with Chris's need to whack, has led to some interesting choices to film. To date, he has rented Maniac Nurses Find Ecstasy, Story of O, Virgin, and many more titles with sexual names and or posters. Considering Netflix doesn't deal in porn, he's wasting his time. Other than these porno hunts and impulsive rentals, Chris is pretty much interested in only 3 types of programs: adult cartoons, British sitcoms, and comedy, displaying a remarkably narrow range of interests. The only movie that really stands out in his selections is Twilight. Netflix has also allowed him easier access to the cartoons of his childhood, Transformers and Sonic being the most prominent. The apparent binge of Transformers-related television may have been the inspiration behind Sonic Issue 9. Beginning in the second half of the 2010s, Netflix also began investing in anime for original content. Of all these, Chris spent a single day in early July 2020 binge-watching BNA, Brand New Animal, merely stating on his social media that it's a very good anime. Given that it's a flashy, action-packed anime consisting of humanoid animals, overpowered protagonists, moralizing lectures, a villainous conspiracy, and the heroine's blood being used for a vaccine to cure the populace, many of which sound familiar anyone familiar with this wiki, that Chris would find it enjoyable is unsurprising. I've heard of Brand New Animal being mentioned once or twice, but I've never really seen it, because to be honest, when it comes to anime and stuff, because here's the thing, about 8 months ago, I, for the first time in about 12 years, 10 years, I started getting back into anime, in a big way, and it started by actually watching a lot of things that were a lot more mature, and probably things that, even sitting here at 27, I'm sort of looking back and going, wow, for example, as of the time of recording this, I have watched every single episode of the original 25 episode run of the 1997 adaptation of Berserk. It's not just, it might just be my favorite anime ever made, and it's probably also one of the most captivating stories of them all. And for the benefits of people out there right now, I'm not going to describe it, but it's essentially the basis. If you are a fan of the From Software Blood Soulsborne series, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, Elden Ring, pretty much it's stuff that kind of originates a little bit from Berserk. At least key characters and such like that all sort of come from that series. Probably, at least some of it is. And for another series I may as well list just before we go is actually a South Korean anime called Lookism. It's only 8 episodes in length, and it essentially asks the question about what happens when somebody, becomes a completely different person in the middle of the night. How does everybody start treating you? Are you really the same person after all, just with a slightly different face? It's that kind of a question we've all heard being said time and time again, except it's a very down-to-earth sort of programming. And actually, there's no real in-jokes. It's kind of played straight, at least from the first 2 episodes that I've seen of it. But with that being said, there are some animes out there that, to be honest, I'm pretty sure I can understand, but the whole isekai genre of anime is one that I'm very, very hit or miss about, because some of them are actually really good. I've heard really good things about Konosuba, even though I've never seen it. I've also heard fantastic things about Don Machi, which I've never seen. Those aren't even the full titles to them, but Solo Leveling, I heard, also has a pretty good reputation. Red Ranger becomes an adventure in a new world, which, yeah, I like it for what it is, I suppose, but it's also those animes that have 20 words just in their title, and honestly, it's starting to get a little bit ridiculous, because why bother watching the show when literally you know everything that's going to happen based on the title? That's why, honestly, titles like Berserk or Lookism is probably far better in comparison. But with all that being said and done, I hope all of you guys enjoyed this little article about Chris on the Box, aka television, and I'll see all of you guys again in the next video. So take care, and bye-bye for now. Well, hello again. And just before each and every one of you leave, if I could just hold your attention for a few more seconds, and I want to show you very quickly my Patreon store. I've been running this for 5 years now, and ever since this month began, I've decided to reopen, relaunch, completely sort out my categories for videos, and I've uploaded them sometimes as far as 3 months in advance. So you guys will be able to get an exclusive look exactly what's coming out, when it's coming out, at your convenience. So make sure to stop by, take a look around, and let's see what you think. Thank you very much for supporting me once again, and I'll see you again next time.